It is the Campaign Beat, our daily roundup of news from the French presidential campaign trail with Florence Vermeulen. Hi, Flo, we got you there. Just 3 days to go before round one. The race is tight. 4 candidates continue to battle it out for those top 2 slots.
Let's take a look at the latest polls from today. Harris Interactive poll. You can see Emmanuel Macron, the centrist, at the top. He's got 25% there. Right behind him, you've got Marine Le Pen, the far-right candidate, 22%. François Fillon, the conservative candidate, and the far-left candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, tied there for 3rd place, 19%. Keep in mind, though, given the margin of error, these 4 candidates are virtually neck and neck. There's just Benoît Hamon there, the socialist candidate, really falling behind. He's fallen back to 7.5% in a very distant 5th place.
Now, the voting is Sunday, but the campaigning officially ends tomorrow night, Friday at midnight. Given that, the candidates are throwing their energy into this home stretch, getting some last-minute support from some pretty big names.
Pretty big names. It's important, of course, to get as many of these big names in the final days. Let's start with the conservative François Fillon. He met with the president, well, former president, I must say, Nicolas Sarkozy. This happened this morning. There's a photo of that meeting that's come out. Now, keep in mind that their relationship has been a little bit frosty. This meeting took place behind closed doors. In recent years, they've had a little bit of a frosty relationship, but especially since the conservative primary in November. Remember, Sarkozy was the big loser of that primary, but he still has a very loyal voting base that could be very useful for Fillon.
As does Alain Juppé. Alain Juppé, of course, the mayor of Bordeaux, who met with Fillon yesterday. Now, they have had a frosty relationship, though, over the past few months.
They've also had a frosty relationship since that primary because, of course, Alain Juppé lost to François Fillon in the primary. And then at the height of the so-called Penelope Gate scandal, there were calls for Juppé to come back and represent the party in the presidential election. That didn't happen, but it did ruffle feathers within the party. All that is behind them. You can see them meeting here yesterday, best of friends. But if you do look at their body languages, it was a little frosty. Let's take a listen.
We talk a lot on the phone. We've known each other for a long time, haven't we?
Too long to count.
Too long to count, says Alain Juppé. Now, what's interesting is right after that conservative primary, François Fillon was seen as virtually being a shoo-in to the Élysée presidential palace. And then the so-called Penelope Gate scandal happened. It really complicated a lot of things for Fillon, including his relationship with the media. Check out this report from James Creedon, who's been following Team Fillon.
In a scandal-plagued campaign, François Fillon has prioritized one particular line of defense: blame the media.
I am the target of a merciless, biased attack 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Is this fair? That's for you to decide, not for a media tribunal.
In January, the Canard Enchaîné newspaper reported that Fillon's wife, Penelope, had been paid hundreds of thousands of euros as a parliamentary assistant, despite there being no evidence that she did any work. It became known as Penelope Gate and almost derailed his campaign. For many supporters, the media is participating in what Fillon called political assassination.
Of course, I think, in my opinion, this is propaganda.
The online newspaper Mediapart recently reported that Penelope Fillon had benefited from public service contracts for longer than had initially been acknowledged. Ellen Salvi has been following François Fillon and insists journalists are simply doing their job.
There's nothing unusual about journalists taking interest in a presidential candidate. I could reverse the logic and say, why did we not take an interest in François Fillon before? Well, quite simply because François Fillon was not enough of a heavyweight.
Such is the extent of antipathy towards the media that scuffles have broken out at recent Fillon rallies.
I've witnessed some bad moments. The media is often in the middle of a rally. You should see what it's like to be in an enclosed space and to be surrounded by thousands of Fillon supporters turning towards us, giving us the finger, insulting us. This is not a healthy relationship.
As election day looms, François Fillon has been turning down interviews with major news outlets such as Le Monde. But designating the press as the enemy is a risky strategy. Fillon's campaign is hoping that the loyalty of his conservative supporters will trump damaging revelations.
Now, on the other side of the political fence, the socialist candidate Benoît Hamon held what he called his last chance rally yesterday in the famous Place de la République.
Now, he might be trailing in the polls, but he also has the support of some very heavyweight socialists, including the very powerful mayor of Lille, Martine Aubry. Yesterday, she had an important message for voters.
Don't let yourselves be brainwashed. Forget the polls. Ignore the calls for the so-called strategic vote. In the first round, you vote for your ideas, our ideas.
Now, Martine Aubry also mentioned something a lot of people are talking about in the lead up to this vote, the strategic or the tactical vote.
It's called the vote utile, the useful vote here in France, because remember, there are 2 rounds in this presidential election. Traditionally, in the first round, you vote with your heart for the candidate you really believe in, and then in the second round, you vote with your head. But this year, things are a little bit different. With the rise of populism, many people are reluctant to vote with their heart in round 1 because they're afraid that it could lead to an undesirable outcome in round 2. Many people feel tempted to vote for a candidate that has a better chance of making it into round 2 than the candidate they actually prefer. In other words, they don't really want to waste their vote in round 1. As you can imagine, this is very controversial and kind of an emotional issue for a lot of people. It can upset a lot of people, particularly smaller candidates and people who are rooting for candidates who are kind of trailing in the polls, like Benoît Hamon. Take a listen.
My heart is with Hamon, but I haven't made my tactical choice yet.
There's only one tactical choice, and that's Benoît Hamon. It's not an issue.
Many voters feel stuck. They're stuck. You know why? Because people are going on and on with this old political trick of the infamous tactical vote. You know who this strategic vote is strategic for? For old, corrupt, incompetent politicians.
We saw there earlier the socialist Benoît Hamon, who might be trailing in the polls in France, but he does have a few fans overseas.
This is a great video that's been making the rounds. It's a mariachi band in Mexico. It's a video of them lending their support here to Benoît Hamon, calling him the next future president of France. Take a listen to this great song from him.
Acuerdo de garantía, haciendo verso tomado, cumpliendo con mi deber.
Flo, so how did that Benoît Hamon song get there again?
Well, someone obviously brought some Benoît Hamon posters to Mexico and filmed this band, maybe a little tune, to cheer him up in the final countdown.
Never knew there were harps in mariachi bands. Learn something new every day. Thank you so much, Florence Villeminot, for that look at the French election. Now, if you are interested in this election, and it is a good one, do check out our election compass. This is a tool that was developed by France 24 in partnership with Vox Pop Labs. It actually calculates how your political views compare with those of the French presidential candidates and can lead to some very surprising results.